My sister took over my room and called me the maid. Months later, I brought the property papers to court. Now she's stuck under legal supervision. I grew up in a house where territory was never really mine. Even as kids, my sister had this habit of pushing her way into my space, scattering her things across my desk, and insisting that my room was better for her needs. At the time, I brushed it off as typical sibling nonsense. I figured once we got older, she'd grow out of it. Instead, she grew bolder. When I finally reached an age where privacy actually mattered, that's when she decided my room wasn't just convenient, it was hers. She started slipping in at night, leaving her clothes on the chair, charging her phone by my bed. At first, it was small, harmless, even. But little by little, I noticed her stuff was taking permanent residence. A makeup bag in the drawer, a stack of books by the nightstand. Then her friends casually referring to my room as her spot. I'd walk in and she'd be sprawled across my bed, texting, barely looking up at me. When I complained, she'd smirk. Relax. You're good at cleaning anyway. You're basically the maid around here. That word stuck. Maid. She didn't say it once in a heated argument. She repeated it again and again, with that smug tone that made my blood boil. And what made it worse was the silence from the rest of the family. My parents didn't step in. They said things like, "She's just teasing," or "Don't make such a big deal out of it." It felt like they had no interest in balancing things fairly. It wasn't just about a room anymore. It was about power. She was testing how far she could go, and how much I would tolerate. So I swallowed it. For a while, I'd lie awake in the smaller guest room, listening to her laughter drift down the hallway from the space that was supposed to be mine. I'd grit my teeth while she left dishes on my desk, shoes on the floor, perfume lingering in the air like an invasion. It was humiliating, and she knew it. She thrived on it. But here's the thing. I wasn't just sitting there taking it. I was paying attention. I was learning exactly how she operated, and I was biding my time. What she never realized, what no one in the house seemed to remember, was that the property didn't legally belong to her. It didn't even belong to our parents anymore. The paperwork, the deed, the rights, they were in my name. At the time, I didn't want to weaponize that knowledge. I thought maybe she'd stop before it went too far. But she didn't. She got worse. And the more she mocked me, the clearer it became. Sooner or later, I'd have to put an end to it. I had no idea just how far she would push me, or how satisfying it would feel to walk into court and finally flip the script. The breaking point didn't come in a quiet moment. It came with an audience. One Saturday morning, I walked into what was supposed to be my room and found my sister in the middle of a full-blown moving day. Boxes were piled high, clothes draped over chairs, and she had two of her friends helping her carry in more of her stuff. My posters had been ripped down. My lamp was gone. Even my bedspread had been swapped for hers, a bright pink mess that felt like an insult just by existing in my space. I froze in the doorway. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She didn't even flinch. She just tossed her hair back, smirked, and said, "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? This is my room now. You can take the guest one. It suits you better." Her friends laughed, like it was some kind of inside joke. But then she added the words that burned straight through me. "Besides, you're basically the maid around here. It's fitting you don't get the good room." Maid. That word again. Only this time, it wasn't whispered in private. It was declared out loud, in front of people who looked at me like she'd just confirmed some hidden truth about me. I felt heat rush up my neck, my chest tightening. My hands clenched into fists, and for a second I considered grabbing the boxes and throwing them out the door. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I looked around and realized something important. She wasn't joking anymore. This wasn't teasing. This was a takeover. She had claimed my space, rewritten the story, and made me the outsider in my own home. My parents, hearing the commotion, finally wandered in. And what did they say? Nothing helpful. Just the usual, "Don't make such a big deal out of it. It's only a room." Only a room. Except it wasn't. It was about dignity, respect, boundaries. And my sister had just bulldozed through all of them while my parents shrugged it off like it was nothing. That night, I lay in the cramped guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to her music pounding through the walls of what used to be mine. Every laugh, every step, every slam of a drawer was like a reminder that I had been pushed aside. And the worst part? She was proud of it. She'd won. At least, that's what she thought. I kept my mouth shut, but my mind was already racing. If she wanted to treat me like the maid, fine. Let her enjoy her little reign. Because one day soon, she'd realize that castles built on stolen ground don't last forever. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The next few weeks felt like living in someone else's house. Every time I walked past my old room, the door was shut tight, music blaring, laughter spilling out. She treated it like her personal kingdom, throwing little gatherings with her friends, while I was left to drift in the cramped guest room. If I so much as complained about the noise, she'd throw the word back at me. Maid. Always with that grin. Always making sure someone else heard it. I started spending more time outside just to avoid the suffocating reminder that I'd been pushed out. But even distance couldn't quiet the anger simmering under my skin. I needed a way out, or at least a way to stop feeling like I was powerless in my own home. That's when I stumbled on it. One evening, I was digging through an old box in the hallway closet, searching for a charger. At the bottom, under stacks of yellowed papers and broken cables, I found a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were neatly clipped documents, property records, legal transfers, signatures. My name jumped out at me, printed in bold letters. I blinked, convinced I was misreading it. But there it was, the deed, notarized, signed over years ago. The house wasn't in my parents' names anymore. It wasn't in my sister's. It was in mine. My chest tightened as the realization sank in. All this time, while she pranced around calling herself the queen of my room, the house itself legally belonged to me. I sat there on the floor, papers spread around me, my mind spinning faster than I could process. Was it possible? Had I really just been sitting on the one card that could flip everything upside down? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the details. When had this transfer happened? Why hadn't anyone told me? I vaguely remembered a conversation with my grandfather before he passed. Something about wanting to secure my future. At the time, I thought he meant savings, maybe a small inheritance. I never imagined he meant this house. The next morning, I brought it up casually at breakfast. Hey, do you guys remember anything about Grandpa signing the property over? My mom shifted uncomfortably. My dad cleared his throat. That was years ago. It's complicated. Don't dig into it. Which, of course, was the exact answer that made me want to dig deeper. Across the table, my sister barely looked up from her phone. What are you even talking about? This house is mine. Everyone knows that. She smirked, sliding a piece of toast into her mouth. You can play lawyer in the guest room. I didn't respond. But inside, I felt a spark flicker into flame. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting. I wasn't just swallowing her insults. I had something solid. Something real. I didn't know how far I'd take it yet. But I did know this. She wasn't untouchable. Not anymore. And I was just getting started. I couldn't shake the thought of those papers. They sat in the back of my mind like a loaded weapon I wasn't sure I should touch. Every time my sister strutted down the hallway, every time she laughed from behind my old bedroom door, every time she dropped Maid like it was my new title, the memory of my name on that deed burned hotter. But I needed to be sure. If I went to war with her and it turned out to be nothing more than some outdated paperwork, I'd look pathetic. Worse, I'd be handing her another excuse to mock me. So I did what I should have done the moment I found the folder. I went to the county records office. It was a gray, rainy Thursday. The kind of day where the world feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. Perfect for what I was about to do. I stood in line, clutching the folder like it was both a shield and a secret weapon. My palms were sweaty, my heartbeat pounding loud enough that I was sure the woman in front of me could hear it. When my number was finally called, I slid the papers across the counter to the clerk. She adjusted her glasses, flipped through the pages, and typed something into her computer. The silence stretched so long it felt like a test. Then she looked up and said the words that made my stomach twist and my pulse race at the same time. Yes, according to the record, this property is indeed under your name. Has been for nearly 3 years. I must have looked stunned because she added, "Is there a problem?" A problem. That was one way to put it. I thanked her, gathered the documents, and walked out into the rain with my head spinning. 3 years. 3 years this house had been legally mine, and my sister had been parading around like she owned it. 3 years of my parents letting her steamroll me, telling me not to make it a big deal, while all along I had been the one with the actual authority. By the time I got home, my hands were trembling. Not from fear, from adrenaline. I laid the papers out on the kitchen table, one by one, in plain view. My mother walked in first. She stopped cold when she saw the notarized seals and my name in black ink. What is this?" she asked, her voice tight. "The truth," I said flatly. My father joined us, scanning the documents, his jaw tightening. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look surprised. He just muttered, "We weren't going to tell you yet. You weren't ready. Not ready." That phrase lit something inside me. Not ready to know the truth about what was mine. Not ready to stand up for myself. Meanwhile, my sister was upstairs hosting another one of her little gatherings in my room, blasting music loud enough to rattle the windows. I felt sick. Not weak sick, fire in my veins sick. I grabbed the papers, marched down the hall, and pounded on the door. The music cut off. Her friends giggled. Then she opened it, leaning against the frame with that infuriating smirk. "What now, Maid?" she said. I held up the folder, flipping it open so she could see the bold print of my name on the deed. "This house is mine. Legally. Every square inch of it. Including the room you've been squatting in like it's yours." For the first time, I saw her face falter. Just for a second. Then she laughed, louder than before, like she was trying to drown out her own fear. "Yeah, right. That's fake. You're bluffing." Her friends exchanged looks. The unease in the room was sharp enough to cut. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just said, "Go ahead. Call a lawyer. Call the county clerk." I already did. The silence that followed was delicious. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one shrinking in the doorway. I was the one holding the cards, and she knew it. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darting toward her friends, and I could see the panic creeping in despite the show she was trying to put on. She wasn't in control anymore. She was cornered. And as I turned to leave, I thought to myself, she still believed this was just a family squabble. She had no idea that I was prepared to take it much further, straight to court if I had to. Because this wasn't just about a room anymore. This was about showing her, once and for all, who actually held the power. After that night, the air in the house shifted. My sister no longer bothered hiding her hostility, she doubled down. If before she used to throw around the Maid comment like a casual insult, now she used it as a weapon, with an audience every time. At dinner, she'd lean back in my old chair, gesture toward me with a smirk, and say, "Don't forget to clear the plates, Maid." Her friends snickered. Even my parents would roll their eyes like I was overreacting if I called her out. It wasn't just about the room anymore. She was carving out a narrative. In her version of reality, she was the queen of the house, and I was a servant who should be grateful for the scraps. And the scary part? People started buying into it. Relatives who came to visit were led straight to her room. She would give them a tour like it was her rightful territory, standing proud in front of my old posters that she hadn't even bothered to throw away. She turned my space into a symbol, proof of her dominance. I'd catch myself staring at her, wondering how far she'd go. Because it wasn't just words now. She had started using the room as leverage. She'd lock the door when she left, daring me to challenge her. She'd borrow things from me, clothes, books, even my laptop once, and when I confronted her, she said, "Maid doesn't need expensive toys." I do. The worst moment came one evening when I overheard her on the phone. I was walking past the room and froze as her voice carried into the hallway. She was laughing, bragging to a friend. "Yeah, it's hilarious. He actually believes he has rights in this house. But he'll never do anything. He's too weak. He was born to serve, not to lead." I felt something snap inside me. It wasn't just the insult. It was the conviction in her voice, the certainty that I was powerless. She truly believed I wouldn't dare stand up to her. And in that moment, I realized that was the heart of it. This wasn't about a room, or chores, or even family dynamics. This was about her building her entire identity on crushing mine. Lying awake that night, the papers spread across my bed like a secret shield. I thought about what the clerk had told me. My name wasn't just on some forgotten file. It was on the official record. The house wasn't symbolic. It was legally mine. And yet, here I was, letting her stage her little monarchy. That's when the clarity hit me. She wasn't going to stop. Not until I broke her illusion. And to do that, I'd have to go all the way. Court, judges, signatures and rulings that would rip the crown off her head in front of everyone. I took a deep breath, a strange calm settling over me. She thought she had won. She thought I was the maid. But soon, she was going to find out what it meant to cross the actual owner. I surprised myself by how calm I felt. There was no melodrama, no late-night fevered plotting. Just a ledger of facts laid out in my head like coordinates. Deed in my name, family's passive enabling, sister's public humiliation campaign, and the only reasonable move was the one that would hurt the most while leaving no room for petty counterattacks. First priority, evidence. The deed was the anchor, but anchors don't win wars by themselves. I needed a paper trail that tied the house to me and proved she had no legal claim to my room. Emails, old letters, utility bills in my name, anything that showed consistent ownership. I thought of the folder's contents and jotted a list in my phone. County record copy, grandfather's will, utility statements, any signed receipts. I would gather them, photocopy them, notarize copies if necessary. Make it airtight. Second, witnesses. My sister relied on performance, friends, relatives, the casual bystander who accepted her narrative because it was loud and confident. I needed quieter testimonies. The clerk at the records office, the neighbor who remembered Grandpa talking about leaving the house to me, the old family friend who had seen the transfer happen. Not dramatic witnesses who'd feed gossip, but credible ones who would hold up under a lawyer's cross-examination. Third, optics. Court isn't just law, it's a stage. She was good at putting on a show in the kitchen and at family dinners. Loud, charming, manipulative. I couldn't let the judge see a resentful, bitter sibling. I had to look measured, reasonable, wronged, but not vengeful. That meant rehearsing my calm answers, preparing a timeline that read like a sequence of documented facts, and making sure my emotions would be confined to testimony, not performance. Fourth, fallback options. If the family tried to call this a domestic dispute and mediate, I'd be ready to insist on formal proceedings. If she escalated publicly, social posts, lies to relatives, I would have screenshots and dated logs. No surprises, only countermeasures. As I mapped all of this out, the anger that had once felt hot and blinding cooled into something far more dangerous. Precision. I wasn't planning revenge for drama's sake. I was executing a legal correction, and I intended to make it irreversible. When I finally closed my notebook, I felt the kind of focus that used to come only before presentations or exams. This was bigger. This was about taking back what had been quietly stolen and making sure she couldn't talk her way out of it. I stood, folded the deed into my jacket, and walked toward the phone. Time to make the first move. I made the call without drama. No threats, no speeches, just the kind of measured phone call someone who knows the rules makes. I reached out to a small family law attorney I'd found the week before, the kind with a reputation for not being flashy but for getting results. I explained the facts plainly. Deed in my name, sister occupying my room, harassment, and public humiliation. He listened, asked 3 precise questions, and then said, "Bring me the originals. We'll file a notice. Don't let her remove anything until we sort this." Hearing him say those words, notice, file, injunction, felt like turning a lock that had been stuck for years. For the first time since the posters were torn down, the future looked tidy, like a plan that would unfold exactly as it should. I scheduled the meeting. I printed copies. I notarized the documents. I wrote a 1-page timeline of events with dates, names, and short descriptions. No flourish, only facts. 2 days later, the attorney met me in his office. He didn't make dramatic promises. He explained the process calmly. A formal notice would give my sister 24 to 48 hours to vacate. If she refused, we could file for an emergency injunction. He also warned me about optics, about how family disputes can get messy if turned into a spectacle, but I had already made that calculation. This wasn't a negotiation. This was enforcement. We sent the notice that afternoon. The wording was direct but professional. Ownership details, request to vacate, time frame, and the legal steps that would follow if she refused. I felt my throat tighten as I watched the time-stamped confirmation email. It was one thing to hold the deed. It was another to put the machinery of the law visibly between me and her. When I got home, the house felt different, like the air had learned to hold its breath. My sister answered the door with a face that was trying very hard to be unimpressed. She tore the paper from my hands, skimmed it, and then laughed. "Really? A notice? You seriously think that's going to scare me?" Her voice had the same smug cadence, but her eyes were flicking around, watching for reaction, testing whether anyone else would back her. Her friends clustered behind her, looking between us like spectators waiting for the next act. I let her laugh. I let her put on the show. I'd already done the quiet work. I had the timeline, the witnesses, the clerk's confirmation, the attorney's file number. I watched her face pale just a fraction when she read the firm's contact information and the deadline. It was a small thing, a micro-reaction, but it told me she was counting on more cowardice than this. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She slammed the door shut and posted about it. Her story was short and perfunctory, a few lines about family drama and crazy sibling trying to steal my home, with a picture of her sitting on the bed that used to be mine. Within an hour, the thread was buzzing. Friends texted, relatives called. Everyone had an opinion. Most were predictable. A few sounded uncomfortable. My phone started ringing. Some messages were hateful, some sympathetic, and a couple were plainly opportunistic. Relatives looking for drama. The attorney advised silence. Let the legal process speak. So I let it. I didn't reply to the posts. I didn't call anyone to explain. I waited. That night, as I lay awake in the guest room, I felt the weight of the notice like a live wire under my skin. Dangerous, electric, and wholly irreversible. I had taken the first formal step. I had forced the issue into the daylight. But I also knew that daylight can reveal more than you expect. Because by morning there was already a new complication I hadn't planned for. A voicemail from my father saying he'd spoken to someone at the bank, and they'd asked questions about the deed. For a brief moment, I thought it might actually be over. The notice had gone out, the silence in the house stretched taut, and my sister disappeared into her room for nearly 2 days. No loud gatherings, no mocking laughs, not even a single Maid comment tossed my way. The hallways felt empty, like a storm had finally burned itself out. On the third evening, I came home to find the door to my old room wide open. Her clothes were packed in a half-zipped suitcase, makeup trays stacked on the desk, and the bed stripped bare. She didn't say a word to me as she dragged the suitcase down the hall, brushing past me with her chin tilted up like she was the one granting mercy. I stood there, staring at the hollowed-out room. My posters were still gone, the walls scarred with tape marks, but it was mine again. The silence felt heavier than the chaos ever did. For the first time in months, I closed the door behind me and lay on my own mattress. Relief rushed in, almost dizzying. Maybe, I thought, she'd finally gotten the message. Maybe the notice had rattled her enough to retreat, to regroup somewhere else. I even caught myself wondering if I should leave it at that. If having the space back was enough of a victory without dragging it through court. That illusion didn't last. The next morning, I came downstairs to find my parents sitting stiff at the kitchen table, a pile of letters between them. Legal letters. My father pushed one toward me without a word. It was a response, written by a lawyer, hers. A petition claiming the transfer of property was invalid, accusing me of falsifying documents, and demanding an injunction of their own. So no, she hadn't backed down. She hadn't surrendered. She'd just shifted the battlefield. And as I read the last line of the letter, I realized the calm had been nothing but the eye of the storm. The letter was more than just a bluff. It was a declaration of war. Her lawyer's words dripped with the kind of aggression that comes from someone confident their client can spin reality to their advantage. According to the petition, I was a fraud. The deed? Supposedly manufactured. My grandfather's signature? Invalid. And me? Just a bitter sibling grasping at straws. I sat there at the kitchen table, reading the lines over and over while my parents avoided my eyes. My mother stirred her coffee like she hadn't already read it 3 times. My father coughed into his fist, muttering something about how maybe it was time to talk it out before things went too far. Too far, I said finally, my voice sharper than the paper in my hands. She's accusing me of forging a legal document. That's not a misunderstanding. That's slander. Neither of them responded. That silence said everything. They weren't neutral. They weren't trying to protect me. They were afraid of her, or worse, complicit in letting her run wild because it was easier than facing her tantrums. That night, she posted again. This time it wasn't vague, it was targeted. Screenshots of the letter, cropped to make it look like she was the rightful heir, captioned with, "Some people will stop at nothing to steal what isn't theirs. Imagine forging your own family's name." Pathetic. Within hours, relatives were calling. Some were furious, others confused. An uncle texted me, "If this is true, you're dead to me." A cousin chimed in with, "She's always been stronger than you. Just give it up." It wasn't just a family fight anymore. It was a public narrative, and she was bending it with the same confidence she used to bend my parents at the dinner table. My attorney wasn't surprised. "She's trying to get ahead of the optics," he said when I showed him the petition and the social media posts. That's common in family disputes. But here's the thing. We have the certified county records. That's ironclad. They can scream forgery all they want, but they can't change what's on file. Still, I felt the weight of it pressing down. Even if the law was on my side, perception mattered. Judges are human. Neighbors gossip. And once poison like that is out in the air, it doesn't just vanish. The complication came when her lawyer requested an emergency hearing. Suddenly, instead of having weeks to prepare, I had days. I spent late nights compiling every scrap of evidence, notarized copies, witness statements, bank records showing Grandpa's transactions when he transferred the property. My attorney drilled me with questions, role-playing as the opposing counsel. What proof do you have this wasn't coerced? Why didn't you act earlier if the deed was in your name for years? Isn't it true your sister was the primary occupant of the house? Each question was meant to twist the truth. Each answer required precision, not emotion. Meanwhile, my sister thrived in the chaos she created. She strutted through the house as if nothing had changed, tossing her hair, calling me Maid loud enough for anyone to hear, knowing it was more than an insult now. It was branding. She wanted the label to stick so badly that even if I won in court, the stain of humiliation would follow me. The night before the hearing, I found myself pacing the guest room, the stack of papers fanned out on the desk. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the sheer volume of noise she'd managed to unleash. This wasn't just a room dispute anymore. It was a battle for legitimacy, for identity, for the truth itself. And as much as I hated to admit it, she'd managed to push me into a corner. But corners are dangerous. There were people stop backing up and start swinging. I sat down, steadied my breathing, and thought, tomorrow she's going to find out what happens when the maid brings the law to the table. The courthouse lobby buzzed like a hive the morning of the hearing. Families squabbled in corners, lawyers barked into phones, and the sterile hum of fluorescent lights pressed down on everyone. I clutched my folder, every page organized and labeled, but my stomach still twisted in knots. This wasn't just about documents anymore. This was about walking into a room where my sister would get to perform for an audience that mattered. And she didn't waste the opportunity. When she arrived, she looked like she was stepping onto a stage, tailored outfit, practiced smirk, and her little entourage of friends and relatives trailing behind like backup dancers. She spotted me across the lobby and, without lowering her voice, said, "There's the maid. Hope you brought your feather duster for the judge." Her people laughed on cue. The words hit harder in that setting than they ever had at home. For a split second, I felt the same hot flush of humiliation that used to paralyze me. Here, in front of strangers and authority, she was branding me again. My parents stood off to the side, not saying a word, their silence louder than her laughter. Inside the courtroom, her lawyer took control fast. He painted a picture of me as an opportunist, someone who found old papers and decided to weaponize them against my poor sister. He emphasized her role in the household, her years of occupying the property, and even tossed in subtle jabs about my supposed lack of contribution. His tone was smooth, persuasive, the kind that makes judges lean back and wonder if there's truth hidden in the performance. And then she took the stand. My sister turned on the waterworks. Tears streaming, voice trembling. She told the court how I had always been distant, how Grandpa had never intended for me to shoulder the burden of the home. She claimed I was twisting his legacy for my own gain. And then, the dagger. She repeated the word. He treats me like I'm nothing, like I'm his maid. Imagine your own sibling reducing you to that. I only fought back because I was hurt. The room shifted. I felt it. The judge's brow furrowed. The audience murmured. For a moment, the weight of her performance pressed down like a tidal wave, and I looked every bit the villain she was trying to paint me as. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded against my ribs, my throat dry as dust. It felt like the ground was sliding out from under me, like she was about to rewrite the truth in real time, and I'd be powerless to stop it. But then, a flicker. Her lawyer handed her a tissue, and in that pause, I saw it. The shift in her expression, the tiny smirk she couldn't suppress once she thought the judge wasn't looking. She was acting, just like always. And while the room bought her tears, I knew something they didn't. I wasn't finished. I let my breathing slow, steadied the fire boiling inside me, and thought, let her have this scene. Let her feel the high of the performance. Because when my turn comes, the stage won't save her. When the judge finally turned his gaze toward me, the room seemed to still. My sister had just finished her act, the trembling voice, the stage tears, the dramatic pause. Her lawyer nodded as if the case was already won. I could feel the weight of eyes on me, waiting to see whether I would crumble under the performance. But I didn't rise with shaky hands or a quivering voice. I stood slowly, deliberate, and carried the folder of documents like it was heavier than stone. When I spoke, I kept my tone level. Calm, precise, factual. Your Honor, I began. There's been a lot of emotion in this room today. But the facts aren't emotional. They're written in black ink, sealed, and certified. I placed the deed on the table in front of him, the official seal glinting under the lights. Then, methodically, I laid down the notarized copies, the county clerk's certification, the transfer statement signed by my grandfather, and finally the utility records that had been under my name for the last 3 years. Page by page, I slid them across, my movement steady, each one landing with the weight of a hammer. This isn't about who cries louder, I said, locking eyes with my sister. It's about who holds the legal truth. And that truth is simple. This property belongs to me. It has belonged to me for years. Her lawyer objected, scrambling, muttering about possible forgeries and family misunderstandings. The judge lifted the first document, adjusted his glasses, and scanned the seal. Then he reached for the second, the third. The silence grew thicker with each page he verified. When he finally spoke, his tone was colder, sharper. These documents are valid. They are consistent with the county records on file. Unless opposing counsel has actual evidence of forgery beyond mere accusations, this line of argument is dismissed. The words hit like a thunderclap. My sister's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, ready to argue, but the judge raised a hand. Enough. I leaned forward, my voice still calm, but carrying steel beneath it. She's been calling me the maid. She's been parading in a room that was never hers. She's humiliated me in front of friends, relatives, and now in this very courtroom. But none of that changes the fact that she has no legal right to be in that room or this house. I'm not here for vengeance. I'm here for boundaries. For a long moment, the judge just stared at us. Then he delivered the line I'd been waiting for. This court recognizes the plaintiff's claim to full ownership. The defendant is to vacate the premises immediately. Furthermore, due to the defendant's disruptive conduct and accusations without evidence, the court places her under temporary legal supervision to prevent further escalation. Gasps rippled through the room. My sister's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed glass. She turned to me, eyes wide, the performance gone, replaced with raw panic. For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. I gathered the papers slowly, carefully, savoring the silence. Looks like the maid just cleaned house. I murmured, not loud enough for the judge to hear, but enough for her to catch every word. As we walked out of the courtroom, relatives who had been so quick to text their judgments now avoided my eyes. The same people who bought her narrative a week ago couldn't even meet my gaze. My parents trailed behind, looking small, diminished, maybe realizing too late the cost of their silence. Outside, the air was sharp and cool, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe. The weight of months of humiliation slid off my shoulders. She had played her part to the very end, but I had written the final act. And it wasn't just a win. It was closure.